Zimbabwe's cabinet approves plan to extend president's term in office through constitutional amendment. This would basically extend President Emerson Mnangagwa's stay in office up until 2030. Other proposed changes in the bill presented to the cabinet on Tuesday include a provision that the president be elected by parliament rather than through direct popular vote. This will essentially mean that the president won't be elected by the people. The president would then be elected by parliament. So adopting somewhat of the same model that is in South Africa.
For years, Africans have argued over whether the African Union, AU, is toothless or simply restrained. The criticism is familiar. Conflicts linger, coups recur, and leaders accused of abuse often sit comfortably at summits. Yet the AU was created to be more than a talking shop, to defend sovereignty, promote peace, and protect citizens. So why does it so often look hesitant? Part of the answer lies in design. The AU is a union of states, not a superstate. Its tools depend on the consent of the same governments it might need to confront. When a crisis erupts, the instinct to preserve non-interference still competes with the newer principle of non-indifference. That tension produces careful language, slow timelines, and compromises that feel detached from the urgency on the ground. Compared with the decisive optics people associate with the United Nations, the AU appears cautious, but caution is built into its DNA. There is also the money question. Peacekeeping, mediation, and election monitoring cost real resources, and funding gaps weaken resolve. External donors step in, but reliance on them narrows autonomy. When sanctions or suspensions are discussed, politics intrudes. Regional alliances, security dependencies, and elite bargains shape outcomes more than moral clarity. Regional bodies sometimes move faster. Think of the precedent-setting interventions associated with ECOWAS. Yet even those efforts show how hard enforcement becomes when unity fractures. Still, calling the AU toothless ignores what restraint can achieve. Quiet diplomacy has prevented some wars from spreading. Norms against unconstitutional changes of government now exist because the AU pushed them into continental consensus. Election observer missions, mediation panels, and early warning systems rarely make headlines, but they reduce the temperature before crises boil over. The problem is visibility. Prevention looks like inaction until it fails. The harsher critique is accountability. When leaders accused of grave abuses face no continental consequences, citizens read restraint as complicity. The AU's credibility suffers when standards seem flexible for the powerful and rigid for the weak. A union that promises African solutions to African problems must show that solutions are not just negotiated pauses, but enforceable rules. So is the AU toothless or restrained? It is both, and that is the dilemma. Restraint without enforcement becomes irrelevance. Enforcement without unity becomes fracture. The path forward is not theatrics, but capacity, predictable funding, clearer triggers for action, stronger legal follow-through, and political courage to apply rules evenly. If the AU can pair its diplomacy with credible consequences, restraint will look like strategy, not surrender. And the question will finally shift from whether the union has teeth to when it chooses to bite.
The Nigerian government is one of the main problems we have in this continent. Across Africa, several countries are pushing foreign military forces out, redefining sovereignty, cutting defense ties, rejecting permanent foreign bases. But Nigeria keeps deepening military partnerships, sometimes with the very powers other African states are distancing themselves from, like France. Now, the United States says it's sending 200 soldiers to Nigeria for training. Training for what exactly? To fight bandits moving on motorbikes and pickup trucks? To fight insurgents? To fight something they created? Or to train an army already regarded as one of Africa's strongest? Let's be honest, guys. Great powers do nothing for free. Military training is never just training. It's influence, it's access, it's strategic positioning. The real question Nigerians should be asking now is, what exactly are we giving in return? Because in geopolitics, there are no gifts, only interest. And remember, foreign boots rarely come with exit dates. Thank you all for watching this video, and drop your thoughts down there in the comments.
I support Burkina Faso's decision to ban political parties because too much party politics has weakened Africa. We fight each other every 5 years, we insult each other, We campaign, we debate, but nothing changes on the ground. No factories, no jobs, no real growth, just politics. Colonial democracy was not designed to develop Africa. It was designed to manage us, divide us, and keep us talking while resources leave the continent. Anyone saying democracy works in Africa must come and prove it. Because what we see is freedom to vote, but no freedom from poverty. I'm not afraid of strong leadership. I only worry when a leader does not mean well for the people. If leadership is focused on national interests, let them build the systems, let them fix the economy, let them industrialize. Africa does not need more politicians. Africa needs more builders, thinkers, and doers. Unity, focus, and action. That's the future of this continent.
Breaking news. The European Union has rejected the Ugandan presidential election outcome, refusing to recognize the vote as free and fair after serious concerns were raised about how the process was conducted. The EU says the election environment was deeply flawed, pointing to the arrest and harassment of opposition figures, restrictions on civil liberties, intimidation of voters, and the absence of a level playing field. While Uganda's Electoral Commission announced President Yoweri Museveni as the winner, the EU stated it only took note of the results and did not endorse them. This rejection adds international pressure on Kampala, as opposition groups insist the election lacked credibility and legitimacy. The EU is now calling for accountability, respect for human rights, and meaningful electoral reforms moving forward. What this means is clear. Uganda's political crisis is no longer just a domestic issue. The legitimacy of the vote is now being questioned on the global stage, and diplomatic consequences could follow. We invite you to engage by liking this post, sharing it with others, adding your perspective in the comments, and following for continued coverage.
We cannot consider ourselves free as long as the people of Palestine, of Cuba, of Sudan, and Western Sahara, and elsewhere suffer occupation, oppression, and war.
So imagine waking up one day and finding out that the rules of the games have been changed, but nobody has the players. The sacred book of the nation is being quietly edited like a WhatsApp message after it's been already sent. Would you be happy right now if you get to know that Prophet Madungwe is editing Bible verses? Well, that's how the people of Zimbabwe are feeling right now. And the wild part is, these edits, they don't start with potholes, with prizes, or with unemployment. They start with who gets to be the president and how long they get to stay in power. This is happening while you're busy choosing between data bundles or lunch. Ladies and gentlemen, who would have thought? Yes, it's happening. The Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 of 2026 is not a movie. This is Zimbabwe. And if you're new here, I do decode complex topics and share updates on what's happening within Zimbabwe and probably Africa as a whole. Please, if you like this kind of discussions, consider coming back. Okay, for us to understand this new constitutional amendment bill, we need to understand what's being circumcised here. The 2013 constitution, which was created after a period of political crisis and negotiated settlement, the GNU, it was adopted by a referendum, meaning citizens directly approved it. One of its main principles was that the president must be elected by the people. Section 92 established direct presidential elections so that every eligible voter could participate in choosing the head of state. Clause 2 of this new bill proposes repealing that Section 92 and replacing it with a system where the president is elected by joint sitting National Assembly and the Senate, meaning you will choose a member of parliament who will choose a president on your behalf. This would involve approximately 270 members of parliament and 80 senators. Under clause 6 of this new bill, the president would also appoint his personal additional 10 senators, increasing the number of senators to 90. So in short, the referee gets to add the players to the team and then they play that match. The Chief Justice will also supervise the election so that it looks fair. This turns 16 million citizens into just spectators, while about 350 politicians become kingmakers. It's not much of an issue. South Africa has that same process of parliamentary system, but the political context in Zimbabwe is so different. Parliament is currently dominated by one political party, which changes how the system would function in practice. That's number one. And number two, clauses 3, 7, and 8 say something even more spicier. These 5-year terms become 7-year terms. The president and his parliament, everyone gets 2 extra years. And who even decides that? That same people. They say it's for stability and long-term projects. They say elections are noisy. Let's lower the volume. Let's postpone this headache. But Section 328.7 of the Constitution literally says no amendment can extend the current president's term. The clause exists because Africa has seen this movie before. Uganda did it. Rwanda did it. Cote d'Ivoire did it. Leaders changed the rules mid-game and suddenly retirement disappeared. This is why lawyers and other groups are asking for a referendum, which basically means asking the people, because touching term limits is not supposed to be a quiet parliamentary thing. It's supposed to be a people thing. 3. Then clause 4 talks about succession. Before, if the president leaves office or in case of death, the vice president usually stepped in. Simple. Now parliament chooses a new president, which sounds democratic until you remember parliament is controlled by party factions. This turns successions into political auctions. Who has the most MPs? Who has the most money? Or who has the loudest allies? Right now, this also weakened the current vice president Chiwenga's succession chances, because now his position doesn't automatically mean next in line. This isn't just constitutional law, this is also internal ZANU-PF chess. 4. Clauses 12 and 16 move voter registration from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to the Registrar General. Everyone knows that that office is a government office. Voter registry. If you follow politics, you know what happened back in the Mudenda era. The voters roll, it got voters that were older than the constitution itself. Now we are going back there, but with better printers. They say it's efficiency, critics say it's control, and control of the voters' roll is control of democracy. 5. Clauses 9 to 11 create a new Zimbabwe Electoral Delimitation Commission responsible for drawing electoral boundaries. Though are not Zama boundaries in my constituents, and though are not decided where you will vote. These functions would be removed from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. The government says this separation eliminates overlapping responsibilities and improves institutional efficiency. Critics argue that's not the case, as members of this new commission would also be appointed by the president. Boundary drawing would become more political influence, meaning the president will have the power to influence members of parliament areas of responsibility. The same members that will again vote for him in the parliament. 6. Clause 14 removes public interview for judges. In 2013, they made judges sit in front of cameras and answer questions so people would see who is joining the bench and why. Now it goes back to closed-door consultations. Trust me, timing is not random. These courts may also soon decide whether this amendment is legal. So changing how judges are appointed is not just a side story, it's a planned strategy. 7. Clause 15 changes the Defense Forces duty from to uphold the Constitution to act in accordance with the Constitution. Government say it's just wording. We all know when it comes to law, wording matters, especially in a country where military once helped change leadership. Uphold sounds like, no, just guard it. In accordance sounds like, just follow the instructions. And 8. Clause 17 abolishes the Gender Commission and Peace Reconciliation Commission. Their roles goes to the Human Rights Commission. They say it's just consolidation. But well, for effect, the Peace Commission was created to deal with the Gukura Hundi and political violence. Removing it quietly closes chapters that were never fully opened. 9. Then there's traditional leaders. Chiefs were banned from party politics to protect raw voters. Now they can openly campaign, which is honest, yes, but also dangerous when chiefs control land and food aid. They also run traditional courts and decide who did what. So just imagine if the courts were to be allowed to directly influence who you vote for. I'm not saying they don't. Okay, let me stop there. But in this case, I'm just saying neutrality dies politely. So I've said all of this, but how does all of this connect? Parliament elect the president, parliament size increases with presidential appointees, electoral boundaries are drawn by a presidential commission, voters' roll is now kept by a government office, judges are appointed without public interviews, chiefs can campaign, terms are extended. This is not just one amendment, it's a system redesigned. Other countries tried this. Uganda removed term limits in parliament. Rwanda changed the constitution but through a referendum. Zimbabwe is trying the parliamentary route with no referendum. That's the key difference here. And history says once citizens lose direct power, it's very difficult to get it back. And who benefits from all of this? The ruling party leadership, faction managers, everyone who controls parliament. And who doesn't? The ordinary voters, you. First-time voters, youth who already feel politics doesn't care about them. Did you know that Zimbabwe 60% of the population is under 35? These changes affect a generation that didn't even vote for that 2013 constitution. It is being debated in parliament and has not become law yet. MPs and senators will vote on it. There might be public consultation. If it passes, it will go to the president to be signed, after which a new delimitation commission will be created to redraw the electoral boundaries. So right now is the last chance for people to question and influence the changes before they become permanent and start deciding who votes where and who is more likely to win. The government is saying this brings stability. Critics are saying it brings silence. Maybe both, but stability without accountability becomes comfortable for those only in power, not those in queues. Constitutions don't die loudly, they die in clauses, clause by clause, section by section, with nice words like efficiency and continuity. This is not about just one man. It's about who chooses leaders in the future, citizens or politicians.
Nobody cares about what happened 60 years ago. If you look at history, the past 100 years, other peoples have suffered more than Africans. Those are bold claims, very bold. Now, the topic in question is the victim mentality when it comes to our participation in political matters. Now, do I believe that there is victim mentality in our participation? Yes, but it's not the core problem. The core problem is dependency. Being dependent doesn't mean that you are a victim. Now, there's a huge paradox that comes manifest when we're talking about this victim mentality. Because when we go back to the Finance Bill 2024 and the protests around that time, people usually talk fondly about their actions back then, how powerful they were, how they showed the government, how they inspired other nations to fight for truth and justice. But then when we're talking about corruption, people go back to the fact that they were killed and the government does nothing, and how the government is involved and how all-powerful the government seems to be. So, question is, are we really victims when we can claim successes based on how we were acting towards the government in 2024? Now back to the claims made. No one cares about colonialism. Problem with that is you're denying the damage that colonialism actually did. First of all, the erasure of African history, the erasure of African culture, our governance structures, our religious structures, all that history is necessary in matters governance, in matters cohesion and unity. All that was systematically destroyed. And then we had to adopt extractive industries because they were trying to extract the most out of African resources. And by adopting Africans into this structure, you also adopt an extractive mindset into the system. And that's why you can see we have extractive leaders to date. To make it simple, you erase our history and then you indoctrinate us into an extractive structure that is still in existence. Another thing colonialism did is dehumanizing Africans to an extent where they introduced the concept of races and a hierarchy in that concept, and Africans were at the bottom of the pyramid. Years of being dehumanized, years of being taught that you're beneath other people leaves a mark, a psychological mark that is not easily removed. And that's why this agenda around decolonizing the African mind. With that being said, we can't excuse the lack of development that is there in Africa, but in regards to Kenya, I would excuse 1963 to 2002 for obvious reasons. 2002 onwards, I cannot. 2002 to 2010, maybe, because 2010 is when we promulgated the new constitution. 2002 is when we went back to multi-party democracy, right? So that period, things were happening that were leading us towards the right direction. Now, after 2010 onwards, I really don't think we can excuse the lack of development that is there in Kenya specifically. Tell me what you guys think on the comment section. Now, until the next video, peace.
Something massive is shifting in African politics currently. And if you look at the headlines each and every day, there is a possibility that you will see a continent demanding respect. You will see a continent that is kicking out armies. And also you will see a continent that is kicking out foreign military personnel. They are standing for what you call global justice. But again, if you try to look closer at the domestic scenes, you get to see something else. Constitutions are being rewritten, elections are being managed, and a youthful generation that is completely fed up with politicians is rising. So today, I want us to talk about the clips that we just watched because they really tell us a lot. And of course, you're gonna get to learn so much from it. So the fight for sovereignty continues. In this case, I will say it's a fight for sovereignty versus a fight for survival. So let's talk about the big geopolitical shift that is currently happening. And I know that you have seen the videos from Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso kicking out French and American troops. I am happy when I get to hear about that, because finally Africa is fighting for herself. They want their own independence. So while the Sahel is screaming, get out of Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali, Nigeria, on the other hand, is actually deepening its military partnership with the Western powers. What a shock. It's not nice at all. So, of course, it's very uncomfortable, because what people want now is independence and true sovereignty, true freedom, not the freedom of being given a flag and a national anthem, and then behind the scenes we are still being controlled. I mean, like, we cannot make our own decisions. So, my good people, I want us to talk about the uncomfortable questions. Why is it that the giant of Africa is moving in the opposite direction of the sovereignty wave? That's Nigeria. Why is it highlighting a split in the continent? Because some nations are redefining sovereignty by rejecting foreign bases, while others, like Nigeria, are doubling down on them for security. I mean, who is actually reading the room correctly here? Because things are not making sense. Nigeria is signing deals with foreign powers. Zimbabwe is dealing with its own internal restructuring, and it looks very suspicious, that one of Zimbabwe, by the way. So, as much as Zimbabwe might be moving away from true independence, from true democracy, I mean, what is really happening in Zimbabwe? Because, and by the way, what are Zimbabweans saying about the whole situation? So far, so good. I don't think that is the case. So many of them have come out and they are really complaining, because they don't want to be in the situation whereby you are born, the president is the same, you go to school, the same president, you get married, the same president, you get grandchildren, and the same president. I mean, we need to give people chances to lead so that we can at least experience their leadership. So, my good people, from the clips, you can clearly see that a lot is being exposed about the Constitution Charter of 2026 in Zimbabwe, whereby there is a talk of extending the president's term to probably 2030, or even abolishing term limits. Like, who wants that? So this is not this particular story about Zimbabwe is not just about one man, it's about institutional logic. Because when a regime feels threatened by the ballot box, they don't usually just rig the vote. They change the rules of the game so that they cannot lose. So I want us to talk about African Union, because there is a clip that we watched about it, and the big question here was, who is checking the power, by the way? Is it the African Union or another body? This guy was asking the question that we are all thinking of. Is the African Union toothless or just a restrained body? And of course, the guy is like, without financial independence and a standing army, the AU is reduced to a talk shop that issues, worded letters, while coups and constitutional changes happen right under its nose. Things like what is happening in West Africa, the Sahel region, and Zimbabwe shouldn't have been happening if African Union was functioning. So if you look at the West, they are trying, the AU, they are trying to focus on Uganda and trying to say that, or not really trying to say, but they are imposing restrictions on the son's president because of the remarks that he has been making against the opposition leader, Bobby Wine. So, of course, that video poses a very tricky debate. I mean, should African elections be judged by international standards, or is that neocolonialism? Okay, if you look at what the Ugandans are saying, is that for sovereignty is normally used as a shield to deflect scrutiny from undemocratic practices. On the other hand, South Africa is taking the sovereignty argument very seriously and even to the global stage. If you look at the president of South Africa, if you watched a clip, he's saying that South Africa is not truly free until Palestine, Western Sahara, and Sudan is free. I mean, that's a very powerful talk. That's a very powerful statement, by the way. If you look at Kenya on the other hand, people are always talking about, being the victims, which I think is really taking us way back. Because if you always believe that I'm the victim, they shouldn't have done this to me. If they hadn't done this to me, I will be somewhere. It's all about mentality. If you say that whatever happened and I need to move on, then that's what will happen. So I don't know what to think about this particular commentary. Kindly comment down below. I'll see you in the next video.